Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War, Warhammer 2, quick match gameplay. This time around we are on the map Zahua Lake, playing as the Skaven against the Tomb Kings. And I did decide to shake up my composition because the Tomb King against Skaven matchup is a little rough potentially for the Skaven. The Tomb Kings can bring a lot of monstrous troops that the Skaven just have a hard time pinning down, and especially the Tube Scorpions, but honestly even the War Sphinxes can just kind of rampage around and do whatever the heck they please and really mess up your back line as the Skaven just shut you down and slaughter you. So with this Skaven you really kind of have to come up with something to defeat them, and I decided I've been trying out this composition with double Warp Lightning Cannons, Veteran up to Veteran C9. And you might be wondering why Veteran C9 for Warp Lightning Cannons, but the reason is that of course the accuracy on artillery goes up an immense amount. In case you're wondering, go into a custom game, test out a max Veterancy mortar against a minimum Veterancy mortar, and you can see how different the AoE is for where they're going to land. The targeting difference is huge. It's a disproportionate change. So much greater than, for example, the melee defense and melee attack improvement really is for a lot of units. So I did bring two high veterancy Warp Lightning Cannons here, partially so that if one gets shut down, the other one would not, and I've kind of built the rest of the army around them. For my Lord, I did decide to bring Lord Skrulk. I think he's obviously the most competitive pick. He's just a decent Lord overall. He does have the contaminated debuff. He does cause magic damage, which is not that relevant against Doom Kings, but still can be useful sometimes. He of course does have Frenzy. He's got the Plague Rash, which is a nice little debuff when he's casting. Good selection of Arf Pestilence to debuff enemy melee attack. A good selection of spells. I did bring Pestilent Breath this time just to mess up enemy squishy units. I did bring Bless with Filth, of course, to apply poison, Vermintide to spawn clan rats, and then Pestilent Birth to spawn a unit of Plague Monks if needed. I also do, of course, Stand Your Ground, the Rod of Corruption for that AoE damage, and then the Liber Bubonicus just to melt down enemy lords a little bit. My front line is composed of a mix of clan rats with shields as well as plague monks. The plague monks, of course, do have frenzy, so they won't rout as quickly to enemy monsters, and they will tear through just about anything the Skaven put on just about any infantry the Skaven put on the the Tomb Kings put on the field. They're definitely not terrible in that sense. On the flanks, they are supported by two clan rats with shields, and finally, hidden in the woods, we do have two units of rat ogres just ready to support in the if my opponent tries to push through. These guys do have very high mass, so they're very hard. So they're much harder for the monstrous troops to kind of push through and just plow into my backline. I also do have two units of Stormwind with the Halberd just to provide some of that AP and anti-large. And of course, they're going to be sitting on top of the Warp Lightning Cannons. And then we do have Skaven Slave Spears. And these guys are just there as a fodder unit because I had some points left over. You can see I've pushed up my Warp Lightning Cannons, trying to get shots down on my opponent's troops. This was one of the big misjudgment because I didn't remember exactly what the map looks like. And so I didn't realize there would be this huge sort of hill that I'd be spawning on. And then, of course, when I spawn zone ends about here, so I'm forced to try to push up my cannons into firing position before my opponent can really plow into me. And that's really rather difficult because right now they just don't have an arc. For my opponent, he did bring 3 units of carry, and you can see here ready to shut down my back line. A front line of Necron Warriors, a bit of an interesting choice, but these guys should trade fairly effectively with the Plague Monks. They obviously won't win, they just don't have the comparable stats to the Plague Monks. The Plague Monks hit a bit harder, have better melee defense, better melee attack, all that sort of stuff. So the Plague Monks are definitely generally superior to these guys. The only thing these guys have going for them is the armor. The Plague Monks do have physical resist, but yeah, they'll definitely give me a run for my money and bleed my front line pretty well. You can see 2 units of Skeleton Warriors backing that up, a unit of Chariots just to kind of cause constant disruption. The Sepulchral Stalker's back here ready to shut down large. Oshapti Greatbows, interesting choice I think against the Skaven, given that these guys don't have, the Skaven don't tend to bring a lot of large single model units, but against the Doomwheel perhaps they could pick it apart a little bit against the Helping Abomination, stuff like that. And they're always a decent choice in just about any matchup. 2 Tomb Scorpions ready to kind of dive in and cause monstrous damage with their AP and anti-infantry bonus, and of course against my non-AP frontline, these guys with their 100 armor are very hard to stop. And then finally High Queen Khalida here, and you can see she's just pushing forward on her Sepulchral Stalker, or the Snake or whatever it is. And of course she's pretty powerful in her own right. She's got Tomb Strike to cause fear and terror, Venom Staff, which is an interesting choice here, that's a magic missile attack, and bunch of little buffs and debuffs. My Will Be Done, of course, boosting melee attack and that sort of stuff. Now you can see the Warp Lightning Cannons finally do get into position, too little too late, but they are going to start teeing off on the Ushapti Greatbows, and you can see a few shots missing going into the Necron Warriors there who are all clumped up, causing a bit of damage, and you can see they're really messing up the Ushapti Greatbows. They're definitely decent in that sort of situation. High Queen Khalida gets greedy and gets hit and goes in first, and it does get hit here by Lord Skrulk and the Liber Bubonicus. And now really seeing these carrying, this is why you want to kind of keep your cannons closer to the front line, just so you can shut down carrying drops like this. The The Carrion will get torn apart fairly quickly by the Plague Monks because they are a small target, so they actually get the anti-infantry bonus applies to them. And you can see they're really getting slaughtered. In the meantime, the Ushabti Great Bows in the back getting shot up, and the Plague Monks are now piled into the Necron Warriors, are trading with them pretty effectively. Unfortunately, my opponent does get these Skeleton Chariots around the flank and is just plowing into my Clarinet shields, and is really going to cause some major disruption here and some major damage. In the meantime, my Storm Vermin pushing in to counteract the Scorpions, and you can see the fight is just going down around the cannons, which obviously I'm struggling to defend right now. The Ushabti are going down pretty badly. You can see over here the Eyes of the Desert are firing into my Storm Vermin with halberds, but the Storm Vermin can kind of just tank through it. I'm not committing them just yet. I've committed my Rat Ogres right now, trying to shut these troops down. I finally do commit the Storm Vermin, trying to shut down this Tomb Scorpion for good. Unfortunately, you can see my cannons are being shut down, taken offline, despite the cast of Blessed with Filth and all that. It's just not feasible for me to defend them because I had to push them up so far to the front line. And you can see the Ushabti Great Bow, though, are forced to crumble by that focused cannon fire. The cannons are definitely no pushovers in that sense, and they do a lot of damage to big targets. Over here, you can see High Queen Khalida just slaughtering her way through the front line of Plague Monks. They are starting to buckle, though. You can see they've done immense damage to these Necron Warriors. Of course, I am casting all sorts of buffs and debuffs wherever that I can, trying to get that Blessed with Filth going. The Warp Lightning Cannon is just getting overwhelmed. You can see the Storm Vermin here fighting tooth and nail, or tooth and claw, really, just to drag the Tomb Scorpion down. But those animations where it dives under and pulls out, as you've no doubt seen before, it can really kind of sneak away and escape you. And you can see I do get a Warp Lightning Cannon shot. It does about 400 damage. It really does a lot of work against these monsters' troops when it can connect. But if it can't, it's really kind of a bit of a problem. You can see the Necron Warriors starting to get slaughtered. The Skeleton Warriors trying to push in, but getting zoned away by these Plague Monks who are just so much superior. And the Tomb Scorpions are slowly but surely getting shut down by the Storm Vermin mob. Over here, the Clan Rats are recovering, though of course they are going to be charged by the Skeleton Chariots. You can see over here, High Queen Khalida does recover and come back, and she doesn't actually pursue the Disintegrating Plague Monks or these Ratted Plague Monks. I think a little bit of a mistake on my opponent's part. Definitely you want to chase the troops off the field sometimes, or try to. Perhaps she would have been able to force a shatter on these guys, because they're pretty beat up. Over here, some Clan Rats are recovered, and I simply forgot about them. And in the pits here, the Sepulchral Stalker is still very healthy. The Plague Monks are definitely falling apart. The cannons are all, practically speaking, offline. They're just not able to fire at this point. I'm trying to escape with a few of them, but it's really not working out. Tomb Scorpions are getting dragged down slowly but surely by the Storm Vermin. Obviously, these guys don't cause poison damage, so the Storm Vermin don't get debuffed against them, as they do, for example, against an Arachnox Spider or some units like that. The Skeleton Chariots here do try to push through, and they get through the Storm Vermin a bit, but then they're kind of tied up on the Plague Monks, and you can see they're definitely getting kind of slaughtered here. The Rat Ogres do land a few hits on them, and at least one Chariot does go down before the rest of them kind of worm their way out. In the front line, in the meantime, the Tomb Scorpion falling apart. This Tomb Scorpion falling apart. The Tomb Scorpions, even when their leadership does stabilize, are just so badly crippled at this stage of the game. Over here, the Sepulchral Stalkers just getting kind of clobbered. You can see the Rat Ogres in the middle of the fray there. The recovering Plague Monks coming back in. The Clan Rats will shortly be able to come back in. The Chariots over here running over some Clan Rats, but honestly, I'm not too concerned about them. They're more of a meat shield filler unit. High Queen Khalida getting dragged into the muck. She has popped Tomb Strike, which is a problem for me because that means she causes fear and terror, But nonetheless, we're definitely dragging her down to the muck. You can see a Warp Lightning Cannon shot actually does go off. The cannons are sporadically coming back online and doing some damage. Skrulk is still very healthy, which is really good for me because at this stage I really need his leadership and I really need that damage output. This is one of the, of course, key problems for the Skaven. A lovely pestilential breath there, going through and just plowing through the Skeleton Warriors and just melting them. You can see it just does so much damage. Skrulk's still fighting. Once again, Tooth and Claw. High Queen Khalida is almost dead. You can see the Tomb Scorpion at this point, I do believe, has gone down to the Rat Ogres, who are still kind of reasonably healthy. They still got their Frenzy up. They've got a lot of weapon strength, of course, their armor piercing and all that sort of stuff. And they got 10 models, so they're very, very strong here. And you can see my opponent finally does pop his Ushabti summon. Perhaps he was waiting to see if for the critical time to kind of get it. And these guys will definitely be a huge problem for me in this stage of the game. You can see the Rat Ogres are mauled. They are, like I said, they are kind of healthy, but at the same time they're kind of not. They're down to 7 models and 10, and under half health each, I think. Storm with Halberds, though, just pushing in. They will provide that support that I really need to crack these Ushabti. You can see the Clan Rats shatter. They just can't take it anymore. They one charge from High Queen Khalida and they're done. Over here, the Chariots do try to push in, but this is, at this point, it's kind of a mucked up situation. They definitely should have flanked there, and you can see they're just going to get kind of blown up or messed up on trying to charge into this line here. Here in the pits, you can see the Ushabti slugging it out, but once they're surrounded by those Stormmen with Halberds, Stormmen with Halberds aren't pushovers in melee. Once again, They don't have the strength in numbers anymore, which is a big problem. It means they're going to lose their higher melee defense. But the Ushabti, nonetheless, they are crumbling on their own volition to begin with, and then on top of that, against anti-large AP, they're just not that good. The Rat Ogres getting slaughtered here in the pits. They're down to 7 models. High Queen Kalita causing some immense work. Of course, though, the Ushabti are starting to wither, and once they're gone, my opponent's army is really just a handful of chariots and sepulchral stalkers. The rest of this infantry is just falling apart. High Queen Kalita is really messed up. You can see I'm trying to get the cannon crews back and trying to sneak them on top of the guns. I do believe you actually don't have to, your crews don't have to mount the same gun they were originally assigned to, so simply trying to get in. I do pop the Rod of Corruption. It's not really useful at this stage of the game because so many of the units left here are big single model entities, but every little bit of damage helps. The Rat Ogres once again making a comeback. They just are not surrendering, not going down. You can see the High Queen Kalita popping the Tomb Blade there, but finally my opponent's army just falls apart. You can see the last Ushabti to summon here, dribbling away to nothingness. And the rest of my army here was really in kind of tatters. Were it not for Skrulk being so healthy, I think that could have gone, that would have been, Skrulk was really the only healthy unit I had on the field at that point. All the rest of my troops were really bludgeoned and really in bad shape. So the critical flaw in my strategy there, or my tactics, I guess, was my deployment of the warp-lining cannons. And this was kind of because I didn't recognize, or I didn't realize the way the map would look when I loaded in. I completely forgot that there's a hill and a slope, and of course the warp-lining cannons, if they can't get up on the ridge, they just don't fire. They don't get the angle they need. So they ended up being kind of entrenched in the back and really unable to get into firing position fast enough. That said, when they did get into position, they just annihilated those Ushabti Great Bows. The Ushabti Great Bows went like 9 pins, and it was really a pretty great performance from the warp-lining cannons. But for 2,700 points, 2,740, I think, is what these guys 2 cost, it was definitely not worthwhile. And I really needed a more open field, and I should have realized that to make them work. Had I had, say, an extra unit of Stormwrath Halberds, or an extra unit of Rat Ogres, and something else for that. Honestly, for 1,400, you can almost get Rat Ogres and Plague Monks, or Plague Monk Censer Bearers, or something like that. I would have been much better off. I could have obviously still brought 1 more Plague Cannon just to get that ranged pressure, but really 2 was overkill in this situation for just killing 1 unit. The rest of my troops just performed rather well. Skrulk, of course, did some good work. That Pestilent Breath was melting through the squishy infantry. Of course, applying poison to my troops and summoning Plague Monks was really useful. The 4 units of Plague Monks did great. They just shoot through my opponent's front line like a hot knife through butter. The big problem was that the Skaven Slave Spears and Clan Rats did very little, and they just kind of folded like wet rags. But not much you can do about that. They're bad infantry, and they're there to be cannon fodder. Stormwrath Halberds also did a pretty good job just plugging the gaps and helping shut down those Tomb Scorpions. You can see the Tomb Scorpions didn't get that much done. 49 and 31 kills is definitely decent, but not amazing. And the Rat Ogres definitely paid their dues just helping shut down these monster troops. They were helping clobber the Chariots a little bit, helping clobber the Tomb Scorpions, the Carrion. One of the important things I think worth keeping in mind when you're dealing with a lot of the flyers in this game, Hellbats, Carrion, Harpies, they all have very high melee defense. So it's actually better in a lot of cases to have a unit that has high charge bonus and high attack values, and if possible, bonus against infantry to deal with them, rather than committing a unit like, say, not Rat Ogres, but like Storm Vermin to them. They're actually because they count as a different unit type. They're a small unit. So Stormvermin with Halberds, for example, will do a pretty terrible job at dealing with Carrion because their melee attack is just not good enough. They don't have much of a charge bonus, so they won't do much on the charge. And the Carrion will just keep pecking at your cannon, so you really want some units to shut them down. Regardless, for my opponent's build, I definitely think pretty solid. I'm not the biggest fan of High Queen Kalita, and I think that in this situation, honestly, had my opponent had Archon, he could have nuked down Lord Skrulk, he could have hit my Stormvermin with Fate of Buna, and that would have just been brutal. My Stormvermin were really kind of an MVP there that held the line when nobody else would, and had that not been the case, that could have been really rough. I'm just not the biggest fan of High Queen Kalita. She obviously got 101 kills here, but I really think that if you need to KO specific targets, then I think that Archon is just better. And really, in this situation where there's a handful of units you need to shut down, he would have been really good. For the rest of this composition, the Nehekarn Warriors really solid unit. If your opponent brings a lot of skirmishing as Skaven, which a lot of Skaven of course do, they're not as good. And obviously they don't trade 1-to-1 with Plague Monks, but they're all a lot cheaper. And in this situation, they definitely did okay. You can see a lot of them raked in decent amounts of kills. The Chariots did immensely well, and definitely that came down, I think, to my opponent's micro. He microed him really well, and that was definitely kudos for that. The Skeleton Warriors churned out a surprising amount of kills as well, 31 and 43, so definitely no pushovers. And really, my opponent here got some pretty good value out of a lot of these units. I just think that his monster usage was not that good. The Shopte Great Bows got slaughtered by the cannons. There wasn't much he could have done about that when he was not able to shut them down fast enough. The Eyes of the Desert and the Tomb Scorpions, though, the Tomb Scorpions kind of overextended. It got trapped in the middle of halberds and rat ogres several times, kind of melted down over time. The Eyes of the Desert, decent unit, but they didn't really get. They were just kind of shooting away, sniping away with their eye lasers, and not really getting into melee at first. And I think that might have been a bit of a problem. Nonetheless, great game to my opponent Swagger here. I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below to keep up with additional content. If you have any comments, criticism of your own, be sure to share them down in the comment section. I'll respond as soon as I can. As usual, guys, I do appreciate you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye for now.